So hello and welcome back to my channel, Managing Marathons. This episode is all about the Berlin Marathon. It's the big one. This is their 50th anniversary, so there's lots going on. So the 50th anniversary, they're expecting more than 50,000 runners. I'm expecting, it's my A goal to get 3 hours and 50. So it seems to be about the big 5-0 this time. Now this is quite a long form video, about an hour long, but I've split it into chapters, so it's chronological from a travel, accommodation, the 5K run, the exhibition, the expo, the race itself, and post-race, what to do, what to see, where to be, when, all that kind of stuff. If you've done the marathon before, fantastic. This will be a great reinforcement, a reminder what to do where. If you haven't, then it's probably a good idea to watch it all the way through. As I say, I've split it into chapters, make it easier for you to navigate. Just skip to the relevant part. And it's going to be a great marathon. I'm really looking forward to it. I want to improve my PB by 5 minutes. I'm currently standing on 3:55. I'm trying to get 3:50. It is a fast, fun, flat marathon. If you've got any questions or comments, please drop them in the box. I'm always happy to receive comments and questions, and I always respond to them. Enjoy. So I'm often asked, how would I describe the Berlin Marathon? Well, put it into 3 words. I would call it fast, flat, and fun. So the 3 Fs, as it were, fast, flat, and fun. And for me, that really epitomizes the whole Berlin Marathon. But starting on chapter 1, which was about travel. Now, of course, there's lots of ways to get to different countries. You know, you can take a plane, train, ferry, bus, drive. It doesn't really matter. Now, last year, I took the train. I found it a much less stressful, easier, cheaper, better value for money form of transport. So, you know, I went from here to London, went across to Eurostar, across to Paris, and then over to Cologne, Hanover, I think, and then Berlin. It worked out at about a third to a half of the price of flying. It takes about 10 or 11 hours. So that's worth considering. Now, it might sound like a long time, but honestly, if you're on a flight at, I don't know, 10 a.m. from Heathrow, the chances are you're up at 6 or 7 getting ready. Then you've got to get to the airport and have all the stress of check-in and baggage control, passport control. Then you've got to wait around forever to catch your flight. When you get to your flight, if it's not delayed these days, the other side of it, where there's thousands of people arriving in Berlin, you will be delayed at the baggage control and passport control, and you will probably need baggage because you're carrying all that extra stuff for the marathon. In any case, my preference to go to Europe these days happens to be the train. It's much more eco-friendly, environmentally friendly, and honestly, if you're running a marathon, I just love the freedom that you have on a train. I mean, you can take a big suitcase as well as a travel bag and a backpack, no extra charge. But more importantly, perhaps, you can walk around, which is great. You can walk from one car to the next. You can go to the buffet car. You can pop up to the loo anytime. You never have to wait for a loo. There are dozens of toilets on these big European trains. You can get yourself whatever you want to eat. And it's just a more pleasant way to travel, in my opinion. Of course, if you're traveling long haul international, a flight may exchange, but Europe is so close these days, particularly with Eurostar connecting you straight to Paris and Brussels, and it opens up the whole of Europe like that. So for me, my preference was traveling by train. It cost about £250–300, but even better if you book in advance, you can get that for even less. Your typical flights, because they've got this dynamic pricing system in place these days, if airlines know that there's a big event going at the destination that you're going to, whoosh, the prices shoot up. So the typical same journey on a plane right now with British Airways is about, an economy is about £600 to £700 in economy. And that's insane as far as I'm concerned, because it's only an hour and a half. When you compare that to a train, as I say, the time difference is neither here or there. Once you take into account the whole day of traveling onto a plane, you may as well just jump on a train, have a much more comfortable, stress-free travel for about a third of the price. So why wouldn't you? So that's the planes. You need to book in advance if you want to pay a little bit more and squeeze into a chair and not have any luggage, or pay a lot more for having the luggage, or take a train. I also have considered the third option, which was a car. Now, to travel on car, I've written my notes here, it's about 10 hours from Calais. So depending on where you are in the UK, so for me to get to Dover would be 3 hours. So for my whole journey to get to Berlin is about 13 hours, including the ferry crossing. So it's not terrible, and it's not much slower than the train, quite honestly. So that's also another option. Would I advise it? No, not necessarily, because you're on a marathon. You want to keep your legs as mobile as possible. Sitting, driving in the car with potentially lots of traffic, probably not the best thing for your back or for your legs. And then on the other side of the marathon, you're going to be sore and your legs are going to be achy. You're probably going to have DOMS, a delayed onset of muscle soreness, which means you're probably not going to be in the mood to drive back and crouch down in a car sitting for all that distance. So a car, although reasonably quick and fast, take into account toll charges, as well as fuel. It probably works out the same as the train, give or take 250, 300 pounds, something like that. But you have got the freedom. If I was to take a car, I would definitely park somewhere outside of Berlin, or get an Airbnb or a hotel or a hostel outside of Berlin, so you can park it there. Make sure you've got parking, because you do not want to use the car when you're there. Just leave the car for 4 or 5 days wherever you are, and then take public transport, which we'll get onto in a minute. There is also the option of the bus, which I have looked at, but the bus honestly is just too long. They're very comfortable these days. They've got onboard sort of cafe service and toilets at the back. But when you're looking at 25 to 30 hours on the bus, it's a long way to go, and that doesn't do it for me. On top of all of that, you're cramping up your legs both directions. So I wouldn't necessarily advise the bus. But however, if you're doing this on a budget, the bus comes in at about £50 return, maybe as high as £75 when you factor in both return trip, going out and return. But again, not my favorite way of transport. But when you look at it, it's 1/10, it's 10% of the flight cost. So no judgments at all. Everybody has their own methodology and their ways of preference of traveling. So that's another option. There is also the option of a motorcycle. Now, I ride a bike and I have considered it. I wouldn't do it for this one. But if it was somewhere like Paris, I considered it for Paris, for example. All you need is the side saddles with lots of all your kit in there. Why? Because it's so much quicker. You don't get charged for the tolls. You often get totally free parking for motorbikes, and you don't get charged through the tolls, or at least in many of the toll stations you don't. So that works out cheaper as well, and it's much quicker on a motorbike than it is in a car, or certainly a coach. So that's travel. And while we're on the travel element, we're sort of skipping ahead a little bit to the marathon now. Part of your ticket when you register is Berlin State or city, Berlin City has allocated 4 days free travel for you if you are a runner, which is fantastic. So once you're in Berlin, you can travel around for 4 days absolutely free. You either have to have your wristband, which I'll come on to, or your bib number. And then as soon as you get it, the first time you use the card, it's obviously time and date stamped, and then you've got 4 days to use it, which I think is fantastic. But I think it starts from the 27th, this year at least, from 27th of September right up to the 30th, which is 4 days, and it covers 2-3 days before the marathon itself, and the day after the marathon, which I think is fantastic, and that's free. So that's something to come on to later. So there's your travel options. Flying, very costly and not necessarily quicker. The car, not great for your legs, and you remember you have to come back when you've got DOMS after running a marathon. You've also got the bus, very, very cheap and inexpensive, but very long time to get there and back. The best I found is 25 hours each one way, 25 hours back. Not everybody's cup of tea. If you ride a motorcycle, it's definitely an option. It's quicker, cheaper, and much more flexible, and there's no charges for tolls and or parking at destinations or motorways, which again, something to consider. So my favorite one is definitely the train. far more comfortable, really good value for money. If you take an overnight, you can sleep, you can stretch your legs, you can walk around the carriages, there's toilets everywhere, and of course you've got the buffet car on these long trains over Europe. So that is travel. Next, we're going to be talking about accommodation. So we'll talk about accommodation in a moment. Let's move on to that right now. So where do you stay when you're in Berlin? Well, Berlin is a fairly substantial city. It's about 3.6 million population. And to put that into context, Paris is about 2.1 million and London is almost 10 million. So it's not a huge city, but equally it's a substantial size city, the same sort of size as Madrid, 3.5, 3.6 million people. So where do you stay? Well, the easiest and quickest option would obviously be to search online. Now, there's a couple of tips around this, simply because I know there are so many search sites out there, Expedia, TripAdvisor, Trivago, Booking.com, Airbnb, and of course all the main headline hotel chains out there. But one of the things I like to do is the two main sites, which you definitely know and will definitely have used in the past, Booking.com and Airbnb. Why? Because I find Booking.com has a huge choice, first of all, and I also like the structure of their website and how they organize the sites that are available. And you can filter through, both with location, the distance from the center of the city out, the price, the facilities, as well as a few other bits and pieces. I know you can do that with some of the other sites as well, but Booking.com seems to be particularly good at that. Now, Booking.com, when you're looking at accommodation, one of the tips I would say is if you're traveling alone, that's of course if you're traveling alone, put down one person, because in the search bar it defaults to two people. So actively put in one person and then you'll come up with solo traveler preferences, which brings up some hotels you wouldn't normally have. The other thing it does is brings up some hostels. Now, I know hostels are not everybody's cup of tea, but I'm doing so many marathons and ultramarathons and have done since sort of April 2023 that I'm having to make sure that I get good value for money. Now, hostels have come a long way. I didn't used to like staying in hostels, but now beautifully kept, they're clean, good hot showers. Yes, you are sharing a dormitory with potentially 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 different people. But you do have, especially some of the nicer hostels now, you get a sort of a bed, but it's almost like closed off, like a compartment, either with a curtain or a shutter. They come with 2 or 3 USB charging points. They've got their own light switches, and they're very private. And you can get them for about 25 euros, starting at about 25 euros a night. And even when there's a big event going on in the city, as I say, even hotels, as you well know, I'm sure, use dynamic pricing. Even with the Berlin Marathon going on, I'm managing to find them for about 40 euros a night. Some of them at that price even include breakfast. So you can't go too far wrong with that. Now, if that's not your cup of tea, and I totally get it, then Airbnb, if there's more than 2 or 3 of you, I would suggest is a very good option. If you get a 2-bed flat or a 1-bed flat where there's a 1 room, where there's a couple sharing and a sofa bed, for example, and the whole thing is, 70 or 80 pound a night, between 3 of you, that works out at very good value. If there's a whole bunch of you, 5 or 6 of you, and you can get a 3-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom apartment, again, 6 people sharing a 3-bedroom apartment at, £150 a night, again, works out at very good value. So the larger the number, if you are friends and you get on with each other, then an Airbnb would be a very good option, because you can split the cost, obviously. And most of them are self-check-in these days, so you don't have to meet the landlord or the owner. There's usually a lockbox or a keep code or a code that's texted to you, so you don't have to meet the owner or anything like that. The other good thing about an Airbnb, of course, is it has a kitchen, because it is a genuine house or a genuine flat or apartment. So in terms of nutrition and hydration, you can buy locally from whole food sailors and make your own meals. So of course, in terms of what you want to consume 2 or 3 days before the marathon, when you have your own kitchen, you can be much more in control of that. And of course, it saves you a ton of money rather than going out and buying, 2 or 3 meals a day externally. And you don't actually know what all the ingredients are sometimes. So just an observation. And I've done both. So, I've stayed in Airbnbs when I've shared with other people. They've got microwaves. They're very well equipped these days. They're not only an oven and a grill and a hob and a microwave. A lot of them now have air fryers, which I think is fantastic. And you can even search for that as an item in the kitchen, an air fryer. I love air fryers. You can get super healthy meals cooked in an air fryer at the click of a finger. They're so fast. And of course, much healthier than using oil or sticking them in the microwave, etc. So those are a couple of good options. The other ones, as I mentioned, Expedia, TripAdvisor, Trivago are sometimes in the mix as well. But also don't forget hotels on Google. So if you literally put on Google hotels or Google accommodation, Google has its own search criteria and will pull up, extract information from all sorts of other sites and give you lots and lots of suggestions. And on Google itself, it will give you the search criteria. What's your budget? How far from the city center? Are there any things that you want as specifically in the accommodation, like an air fryer in the kitchen, maybe a hot tub, maybe a bath instead of a shower? These kind of things you can search for. So accommodation really does become very critical. The one thing I would say with accommodation when you're at a marathon, now the Berlin Marathon is fantastic, much like the Chicago Marathon, for example. It's a closed circuit. Unlike London or New York, where it's point to point, you have to travel from one to the other and you have to figure out where do you want to stay, at the start or the finish. And it just complicates. It's just another layer of complication. Berlin is a looped circuit. You start and finish at the same point, which simplifies it enormously. My preference would be bang on the start finish, as close as you can get, because public transport before and after the marathon is very busy. You still have to use it in many instances. I've often walked back to my accommodation after a marathon, which is a looped circuit, because it helps relax the legs and you keep that blood flowing. And it's a little bit of a very low intensity, slow workout after the marathon, which really does help start the recovery process quickly. So in summary, book close to the start-finish line if it's a looped circuit. In this case, Berlin very much is. You start and finish at the same place. Book centrally so you don't have to go too far. If you can walk there and back, even better. A lot of hotels, of course, are very, very central. Look at booking.com. Use as a single person if you're traveling solo, because it opens up more options. If you're staying in an Airbnb and there's 5 or 6 of you, that actually works out extremely good value per person for 1 night, 3 nights, 5 nights. And the other options not to be dismissed, as I say, Expedia, Trivago, TripAdvisor, and of course Google itself. Google Accommodation or Google Hotels will bring up a whole host of things. If you put in the location, how far you want to be from the center, and the dates, bang, and everything's up there in front of you. So here's a quick example of how I've searched for Berlin. For example, you can see in the search bar here, Berlin City Center. So let's just put that in again, Berlin City Center. It'll come up with a number of options. You can see clearly that I've put the dates in. So the date's 27th to the 30th of September. Of course, we're only 2 weeks out. So most of the hotels will now be booked. As I mentioned, this is dynamic pricing. So a lot of the hotels will be fully booked. So also notice that I've put 1 adult. Now it defaults as 1 room and 1 adult as opposed to 2. So let's apply. Now the search I will create there for 27th to 30th, and you'll see straight away that we're looking at a number of different hotels: 580, 480, 591, 189, etc. Now, if I use the filter function, which is here, you can see that the prices range from 50 euros to 2,000. If you use the slider and drop it down to whatever your budget is, this is dropped down to 150. Let's just do that to 200, for example. You can see at the bottom left there, it says 10 matching properties. So let's show the results. Now, at that low price, you're often going to get the hostels, which I mentioned are very good value. Now, look at this. This is almost the Circus Hostel. I'll just heart that for now. Almost a 9 out of 10 score, which is very, very good. 3 nights at 189. The next one, 167, 7.5 score is still very good. 7.8 score out of 10 is still very good. And look at the number of reviews, 1,700 reviews, almost 6,000 reviews, over 6,000 reviews. So with that amount and volume of reviews, you can be sure that these reviews and the score are pretty accurate. So to be honest, anything over 7 is very reasonable. Over 8 and 9, they are actually very, very good. And some of them will even include breakfast. So the search, Berlin city centre, the date you can see 27th to the 30th of September, which covers the marathon a day or two before and after. And then the rooms, 1 room, 1 adult. And as I said on the video, 1 adult often brings up solo traveller, so it's well worth looking at. Then just hit the search button and it comes up with all the various ones. And you can see the prices there. If you do the search, once again, if you do the filter for, let's say, £150, remember you've got so many different filters here. So do you want to include parking? Do you want to include breakfast? Do you want to include free cancellation? Breakfast included, for example. Free Wi-Fi, for example, for 3 nights. There you go. So this is 186 and very high scores, 7.8 and 8.1. Remember, this includes breakfast and they are very close to the city centre. These are hostels. So well worth searching for hostels, both on here or, as I mentioned, on Airbnb as a solo traveller or as a group of 4, 5 or 6 people, which represents very good value. So that's travel. I hope that's helped. I look forward to seeing you on the next chapter, which is all about the Expo. And the Expo really is quite something in Berlin. So just got my wristband done. It's automated. There's a bunch of them doing it. So the queue's going very quickly. So there you go. They got a bag. And now finally we get into the exhibition. So check in later. So the exhibition, what can I say about the exhibition? Well, having done some of the majors already, Chicago, New York, London, obviously. London is at the Excel Center. Chicago's at a big exhibition center, and so is New York. I have to say, Berlin, not quite as grand in a funny way, but it's enormous. I think by footprint, apparently it's the 2nd largest building in Europe, which is huge. But when you get there, it's got a smaller feel than that. But nevertheless, it is a big venue. It is actually the old airport in Berlin. So if you're traveling in on a flight, and it's one of the landmarks in Berlin that's on a tourist checklist, as it were. So if you're flying in to the current airport in Berlin and take public transport to what was the old airport in Berlin, that's actually where the exhibition is. And it's called Tempelhof. It's the old Berlin airport. It's huge. There are 3 hallways from memory. There's an outside space. When you get there, please remember to bring in your barcode, which will be emailed to you. Also remember to bring in your passport or some kind of form of photo ID. I always take both my license and my passport, and of course the email with the code on it, which is basically a QR code that will be emailed to you. And that's, of course, for a number of reasons. One, you get a wristband, and that wristband is sort of heat melted onto your wrist. When you get there, make sure they will adjust it and ask you if it's too tight or too loose. Make sure you're comfortable with it before they seal it. That wristband is super important. Do not take it off. Do not lose it. It's impossible to pull off. It's on there solid. You'd have to cut it off after the marathon. But that wristband is very important. Gets you through all security to do with the marathon. It gets you through the start line. It gets you into your bag drop area. It gets you into the corral for the start line. So whatever you do, don't take off that wristband. But when you get there, Three big holes. You're allowed to take in a wheelie bag, the same as the same as your onboard luggage on an airplane, as well as a rucksack or rucksack of some description. There are some security checks. The queues are usually quite big. My tip would be to go on Thursday, which is the first day. Friday gets busier. Saturday is very, very busy. Sunday, there is no bib pickup, so do not fall into that trap. There is no bib pickup at all on Sunday. It's closed. So you've got 3 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. If you can't make, a normal daytime, then you're probably better off going later. So when I mean later, between 6 and 8 p.m. on a Thursday and a Friday, it's actually quite quiet and you kind of skip all the queues. So that's something to consider. Now, as far as the pickup hall is concerned, it's a bit like IKEA. They kind of weave you through all the merchandise of the first two enormous halls before you get to the third hall, which is where you get your bib pickup and your number and your chip. Now, as I understand it, the big change for this year is that you don't have to have a little device, which is basically a tracker that we had to tie up to our laces last year, 2023. This year, like all marathons, thankfully, they're putting them on the back of the actual bib, which I think is much, much more sensible and much easier, honestly. The number of stories I've heard where people have finished the marathon and either lost it and it's cost, I think it was 10 euros or something, if you don't hand it back, or because they're so sore to bend down and get it off your shoe, or even take your shoe off after 4 or 5 hours of running to get rid of this silly device was insane. And a couple of them didn't work. And now imagine the number of footsteps you're taking on a marathon. I'm not surprised some of them don't work. So I think this sort of thing at the back, like most marathons these days, where the chip is part of the bib, makes much, much more sense. Now, the other thing I noticed is, unlike some of the majors where you have to go to your letter allocation. So for example, if your name starts HOF, you'd have to go to the letter H and then go and pick up your bib number from the surname, which begins with the letter H, for example. Or you may have been given a code and you have to go to a certain number. So my number last year was 22102. On some marathons, they will be from sort of 5,000 to 9,999, then from 10,000 up to 14,999, and you simply go to where your number should be. Now, as I understand it, this year it's slightly different in the sense that you can rock up to any one of the booths, and it's a bit like checking in an airport, because guess what? It was actually an airport, so it feels like you're going to check in. And because it's all automated now, wherever you rock up to whichever booth, as long as you present your license and or passport and your QR code, they will print your number then and there, which includes the timing chip at the back. So it's actually simplified the process a little bit, which I think is much, much better. So that's the first couple of things to remember with the hall. Now, if you're a sort of merchandise magpie, then you're probably going to spend a lot of time in Hall 1 and Hall 2 before you get to Hall 3, which is where you need to pick up your bib. What I did last year was go straight through, which was hard work because you're very tempted to stop and look at all the merchandise. But I went straight through and picked up my bib, and even then there was still a bit of a queue, because you've got a queue to come in order to get your wristband melted and secured to your wrist. That's a big queue there as well. But once you're released from that, you can go in through the main halls and, as I say, circumvent Hall 1, Hall 2, get to Hall 3, pick up your bib and your bag, and that works really well. What I then did, probably naively, was sit down, and I had a muesli bar and a coffee and just took in the whole atmosphere. What I realized very quickly is you can't go back to Hall 2 and Hall 1. So it was a bit daft. So I ended up having to go back out of the whole exhibition, come back through where they put the wristbands on and queue to get back in. And then I was able to go on, meander through Hall 1 and Hall 2. It's sponsored by Adidas and Morton Gels, which are the two main sponsors there, as well as New Balance. So a lot of the hall is taken up by New Balance, Adidas and Morton, and lots of other exhibitors as well. So the reason I say that is because when I came back into the hall again, it was so much busier. I was only about an hour or 90 minutes just chilling out, having my coffee and a muesli bar. But 90 minutes makes a huge difference because I was there very early on the Thursday. In fact, I was waiting as they were opening up. So very early indeed. And the problem with that is when I left it an hour and a half, 2 hours later, by the time I got back to Hall 1 again, it was ram-packed. And I couldn't get into any of the stalls. There were queues to look at and participate and get into all of the stalls. The merch was all muddled up already. A lot of it was on the floor. So be careful. If you're after the merch, do it straight away when you get there. I know they tidy up and restock the shelves later, but it's about timing. So if you are there early, get your merch first. You'll circumvent all the queues, then go and get your bib. Your bib will be ready anytime anyway, but again, it's a trade-off. Where do you want to wait? Where do you want to queue? At the merchandise stuff or at the bib pickup? I would probably do it the other way around this time. I'd probably pick up the merch first. You might want to get a finisher t-shirt. You might want to get all kinds of stuff. Trainers, you name it, they sell it. If it's running related, it'll be there. And then get your bib later. I would probably do it that way around. So remember, as far as the expo is concerned, remember, you need a driving license, passport, and your QR code, which will be emailed to you. Really, really important you get those things. Otherwise, you cannot get your wristband and you certainly can't get your bib. Your kit bag will be issued to you when you get your bib. That has a number inside. I would take the number off immediately and stick it onto your kit bag so you don't lose it. That kit bag is what you will use to drop off your kit so you can get back into warm, dry clothes with all your nutrition at the end of the marathon. So that goes to your drop-off bag, and it's quite a big bag. It's clear plastic, and stick your number on it as soon as possible. If you want t-shirts that you think might not be in your size, or you think you're going to get there late so they won't be available, you can order them right now in the UK from the Adidas website, or you can go to the SCC website and order different bits and pieces on there, which is the marathon site where you placed your order to enter the marathon in the first place. So you can pre-order stuff and you can pick it up at the exhibition. So there's going to be a lot of merch this year. So if you're on a budget, be careful, because there's usually an event t-shirt. There's usually a finisher t-shirt, which I got from last year. And this year, I strongly suspect there'll be an enormous amount of 50th anniversary merchandise. And it will be overpriced and they'll be in short supply. So if you're not bothered about that stuff, don't worry about it. If you are, then I would probably pre-order it. Now, that's pretty much it for the expo. Get there early or get there late, I would suggest, because the middle of the day is packed. It's the typical bell curve. In the middle is everything. The start and the end, there's very little going on. Those are probably the best times to go. Take your passport, take your license, make sure you got your QR code. Do not leave without your bib, and do not leave without your wristband. Those are the two most important things you need to leave with, and do not take them off. At least do not take your wristband off. One thing about the bib, and I took these out, this was the D-Day Marathon, which I just did, is the bib size. If I compare that bib size with that bib size, you can see there's an enormous difference in the size. Now, why do I bring that up at all? Well, this, particularly if you're running for a charity, it covers most of your chest, so you won't be able to see anything. The other thing is, because it's so wide, you can kind of catch it with your watch or anything that's on your arms. So be careful with that. And you probably need 6 safety pins instead of 4, because it's quite big. It's very easy to catch on things passing by, other runners, your own hands, your watch strap, things like that. Whereas this, for example, the the Normandy Marathon was much, much smaller and didn't catch on anything. So something to be aware of, just a logistical point. If you've taken safety pins or those pins that you can get for marathon bibs, take an extra couple at least. All right, thanks very much. So the next one will be about the shakeout run. That is the Saturday before the actual marathon. See you soon. So I managed to find mine from last year. You can see this is the bag drop. This is where you collect your bib. You're actually handed over a bag. It's quite big. I don't know if you can see that, but it's about, I would say, 70 centimeters by about almost 40. So quite a sizable bag. You will get everything in there. Your spare shoes, your sliders, dry clothes, your nutrition after the race, post-marathon as it were. So a great big bag. It's very robust. It's got 2 strong rope straps, so you can actually carry it as a backpack, which is really handy. But the one thing I wanted to point out is, you will recall I say you're given a sticker inside the bag when you pick it up. That's the sticker. Turn it around. There's the sticker, and if you notice, it matches the number, if I can see it somewhere, matches the number on my actual bib. So the first thing I would do, as I said, is put that sticker on the bag, and then at least if you lose it, they can track it back to who it belongs to. Well worth doing that. All right, so there's your bag. Well, we've reached the Olympic Stadium, all the flags, everyone's cheering. It's not the marathon, but it feels like, I don't know, thousands of people. We get some goodies, I think something to eat, banana, protein bar, and I think a breakfast from what I heard. Anyway, catch up later. So what about the shakeout run? Well, in most of the major marathons, they will have some kind of Saturday run. Now, Saturday runs is entirely a personal choice. It really is up to you. Whether you choose to do what they call a shakeout run on the Saturday, the day before the full marathon, as I say, is a personal choice. Lots and lots of people do. I've done it on all 4 of the majors. And I've not done it on other marathons as well. And I really just wanted to test myself. On balance, for me personally, I would say doing an early shakeout, and I mean no later than 9 a.m. the day before the marathon, seems to work for me. Just helps your legs limber up, keep that blood flowing the day before the marathon. Remember, you're on a taper anyway. The whole point of a shakeout is just to limber up a little bit and not to stress your body. So take it super slow. Most of them are between 4 and 5 kilometers. If there's not one organized by the formal marathon organizers, for example, Chicago is organized by Abbott's, New York is organized by Abbott's. The reason I bring that up is because I'm a little bit disappointed, if I'm honest with you. The Berlin Marathon last year had a fantastic shakeout run. It was actually called the Friendship Run, and it was essentially a kind of a very early morning party. Everyone gathers about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. They're all dressed in fancy dress. You can see some of the pictures on your screen now. It's essentially a fun run, but what I really liked about it is, as I say, people go to a huge amount of effort to dress up, and it's an A to Z announcement of all the countries that are taking part. And of course, when your country was called up, 3 or 4 people, or 10 or 20, depending on how many from that country came, would cheer very loudly. And they were all either dressed in traditional dress or some crazy outfits. Last year I saw people dressed as doctors, as nuns, as Crayola crayons. You can see some of them on screen right now. But what was really nice about it is we took that run for 5K and ended up at the Olympic Stadium, and you'll see the pictures on screen. The Olympic Stadium was fantastic, I have to say. It's the first time I've been into that stadium in Berlin. And as you enter, the noise is crazy. And of course, when you go in, you've got this huge stadium around you and the big Olympic rings. It looks absolutely fantastic. And then after you've run the 5K, there's a huge free breakfast with, you name it, bagels, salty snacks, foods, bananas, apples, fruits, all kinds of pastries, tea and coffee, water, you name it. And it was just a really nice touch. And as I understand it, it's been going on for years. I've only done the Berlin Marathon once, and I really, really enjoyed that. It was well worth doing. So the cynic in me, I'm a little bit skeptical. This year, 2024, they've stopped that, which is a real shame. And they've replaced it with what they're calling the Generali 5K run. Now, the Generali, as far as I'm aware, is an Italian insurance company. They seem to be sponsoring the 5K fun run on a Saturday in Berlin. And I say a little bit skeptical because it seems to be revenue, money grabbing generated. You know, it's 35 euros to enter, whereas the friendship run from last year and previously was free. Plus, it was a lot of fun. This one seems to be going in line with both the New York and the Chicago Marathon, where you have to pay to run a 5 kilometer race on the Saturday. And I say, you know, it's 35 euros. It's much more well structured, but it seems to be 5K out and you finish just beyond Brandenburg Gates. Now, I don't know about you, but personally, I don't want to cross the Brandenburg Gates until the main race, which is the marathon on the Sunday. So that also doesn't sit very comfortably with me. A bit like these things, and on going off topic slightly, this is a finisher t-shirt. And we talked about merchandise already, but it's a bit like the finisher t-shirt. I mean, you might think it's a little bit odd that I wouldn't want to wear the finisher t-shirt on the marathon because I haven't earned it yet. And so for me, crossing the line on the last 5 kilometers of the actual marathon, the day before the marathon, also doesn't sit very nicely with me. But all said and done, I guess it'll be very popular. You know, the 5K runs tend to be very popular, but there are other meetups. So don't get pulled into the 5K 35 euro, you know, Generali 5K fun run. There are other ones which organized by sports tours, by marathon tours, by meetup. There's lots of other really nice 5K runs, and if you just go online, you'll find lots of them. The Tiergarten is right there. There's always between the 3 and 5K local organized runs in the Tiergarten. So there are lots of options. You don't necessarily have to pay the 35 euros and do the 5K with Generali. So that's the shakeout run. As far as I'm concerned, it's definitely a personal choice. I think on balance, I would prefer to do a short shakeout run on the Saturday. Some people prefer just to literally put their feet up on the Saturday. I've also done that. Both seem to work, but I think I'm less sluggish and more fired up on the Sunday morning when I have done a 5K run on the Saturday. So that's personal choice. Do the 5K Generali, pay your 35 euros and cross the finish line that you will cross. It's literally the last 5K of the marathon. Again, you know, I don't get a good feeling with that. Same with the finisher t-shirt. A lot of people order the finisher t-shirt in advance and run the marathon in the finisher t-shirt. That's not comfortable for me either. So entirely up to you. But if you do the shakeout run, enjoy it. It's really good fun. I'm sure there are many others, as I said, with meetups, sports tours, marathon tours, and lots of local, you know, influencers who will also advertise that they're doing a shakeout run on the Saturday. Enjoy. Next chapter will be about the start line. So here's the bag drop area. Drop my bag off now, so all good. And now walking towards the start. There's everybody else. And going into my pen, and I'll be starting in about 40 minutes.
We chase no time, we get a medal.
So the start line, Berlin Marathon, one of the world's majors. It is probably the one that has the most fun and party atmosphere for sure. Now, I haven't done Tokyo and I haven't done Boston, but I've seen lots of videos and listened to lots of blogs and vlogs and podcasts to know that actually Berlin seems to be the one at the top of the triangle here with in terms of party atmosphere and just the whole event seems to be driven by fun. As I said, the way I would describe the Berlin Marathon is fun, is flat, fast and fun. And that seems to be one of the major elements for Berlin, which is fantastic. And the start is no exception. Now, but before we get to that, how do you get to the start? Well, wherever you're staying in Berlin, as I've already said, you get 4 days free public transport in Berlin. So that's the U-Bahn, the S-Bahn, and the buses, of course, and trams. So that's free. So make the most of that. The 3 stations that you need to consider that are close to the start line are Friedrichstraße, Potsdamer Platz, and Bahnhof, which is the Hauptbahnhof, which is the main train station. All of them have regional trains, S-Bahn and U-Bahn connections, as well as bus connections. So you can't go too far wrong. So those 3 stations are Friedrichstraße, Potsdamer Platz, and Hauptbahnhof. All 3 will get you to the start line. Probably and roughly, I would say 7 to 8 minutes to about 12 minutes walk from all 3. So it doesn't matter. And actually a 10-minute walk is probably a good thing before the marathon. Now, when you come off, I would say the best one, if you are on that line, that particular line, then the Hauptbahnhof, which is the main train station in Berlin, will get you there the quickest if you want to. About 8 minutes walk, you come out of Hauptbahnhof, and as far as I remember, you go to Paritzia Platz, and from Paritzia Platz, you then walk, like I say, more or less right there at Brandenburg Gates, or Brandenburg Tor, as they say. When you're there, you're at the start village. That's it. You're more or less there. Now, what I would say for sure, remember your bib. It should be on your shirt by now, of course, whatever shirt you're running in. Remember to do a flat lay the night before. For me, the flat lay, I'll show you a couple of pictures now, basically means getting all your stuff ready the night before. And in your head, in terms of sleeping, once you know you've got everything ready the night before, you probably will sleep better. It just helps calm the nerves. The next morning, all you have to do is put all that stuff on. So here's your bib. And as you can see, if you've got what I call marathon brain on the morning of, because you're stressed and you're excited and it's a big event, then just look down. You'll see on there, I don't know if you can see it, is the letter K. That was my corral number from corral letter from last year. So the letter K is where I was starting. You will see from the map that they are from the elites right at the beginning all the way through the last letter. Look down on your bib. If you've got marathon brain, that'll remind you which corral you're in. Just get to that corral. And remember, you should not have taken off your wristband, of course. That will still be attached to your wrist. That will also help you get through security and to your right corral. Now, remember, I think it's the 22nd of September this year. This is 2024. That you, up until that date, you can change the corral number that you want to go into. By that, it means that you're able essentially to go to a faster group. Now, be careful with that, because psychologically, you might want to be in the correct group. Don't try and sort of cheat in inverted commas and go to a faster group, because if people are faster than you, then essentially there'll be lots of people passing you by. You'll be getting in their way. But more importantly, perhaps, from your own psychological perspective, all you'll find is that people are going past you. And that has a negative psychological effect. You're better off going in the group that you think you're going to be most comfortable in, or a slower group, so you're the one overtaking people. That way, psychologically, it gives you a boost. It actually gives you a much more positive vibe. You feel like you're running on pace, or at least overtaking other people, which just makes you feel a little bit better, rather than being overtaken by lots of people. So get into the right corral. Up until the 22nd of September, you can change your corral. If you've got a marathon pace in mind, stick with it, and I would suggest that's probably a good option. Now, when you get to start village, remember your bag, which you should have pre-packed by now. You've got all your bits and pieces. They are massive bags, so you get lots in there. They've got little carrier straps, so you can put it around your back and then have that ready to drop off. Where you see your number, you just go to the correct booth and drop off your bag at that number. So that's fairly straightforward, fairly simple. That gives you a feeling of like, I've got rid of the bag. You might have to wear something warm. I generally take a very old sort of pullover or jumper or something like that from a charity store that I've bought in the UK. That then drops off at the start, but it does keep you warm before you start, particularly if the weather's cool or raining, and those all get picked up, so don't worry about dropping it off. There's lots of drop-off buckets, but most people just drape them over the fence. That will then be collected and all given to local charities. So it's a great way of recycling clothes, and it's a great way to maintain charitable donations for the marathon and people in need. So a couple of things with that: the bag drop off, wear something warm on the morning, get to your corral early. That's my other bit of advice, and make sure you're in the correct pen. They will check your wristband and your wave number anyway, but get to the corral early for lots of reasons. One, you don't want to have the stress or anxiety of getting there late. A couple of things. One, if the corral is 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 people, you're right at the back. You're not quite as close to the festivities. If you can get somewhere near the front, you don't get this congestion that you get in these big international marathon majors. Somewhere at the front quarter or front third is always a nice place to be. You can see all the party atmosphere. The DJ goes nuts. There's fireworks. They have this sort of European based techno music going on for 10 minutes for each corral start. It's well worth getting your phone out or your camera and taking pictures, taking video. It's a huge atmosphere. They start this drumming, clapping thing going on, which is Berlin Marathon is famous for. Definitely be there for that. Take part. It really does build the momentum and the excitement, and well worth witnessing and being part of. So remember, at the start, you're probably going to be fully hydrated, so you're going to have to pop to the loo at some point. The queues for the toilets are insane. I'm just going to tell you that now, so be prepared for that. What they introduced some years ago, and especially in London 23, were urinals for the men, which I thought was a fantastic idea, because not only can the men go and have a wee, it also means it frees up the cubicles, the porta potties for the women. So it's a great addition. So if you just need to go for a number one and you're a guy, go for the urinals. It frees up all the porta potties, and it's much quicker anyway. So if you're a lady, be prepared for a long wait, or think about how you're going to get to the loos, or join the queues early, and as soon as you've been, if you've got nothing else to do, join the queue again and then go for another wee, and just sort of empty your bladder before you start. You will have been well hydrated, so that's normal. Now, the start line warm up and the music, as I say, is fantastic. The fireworks, the atmosphere is superb. You are going to be in the Tiergarten, which is a wonderful avenue. It's a huge street before you get to the Victory Monument at the end. It's about, 4 lanes wide on one side, 4 lanes on the other, so it's about 8 lanes wide, give or take 10 lanes when you consider the bus lanes on either side. So it's a huge, wide European avenue, and it goes on from Brandenburg Gates all the way to the Victory Monument, and the start is insane. It's one of the only races that I know of where everybody's lined up in one great big road and the atmosphere is insane. You'll see the pictures both online, and I'll flash a few up right now. So the start line, reminder: Friedrichstraße, Potsdamer Platz or Hauptbahnhof. Get there, it's about a 10-minute walk from most of those stations. Get to the start village early, drop off your bag as soon as you can, get to your corral early, take part of the festivities. There's lots of music, lots of exercises, and the DJ really does do a good job to warm you up. And get to the toilets early and often. relieve yourself, be comfortable when you start, get in the race mode zone, as it were, and then off you go. Now, as far as the race is concerned, that's the next chapter, and I look forward to that in a moment. So you'll get this as part of your information pack. This is the PDF of the start line. Let's have a closer look at this. You'll recall from the video that I had a start letter of K, which is right there. And if you look at that more carefully, then we are approximately that far from the start line being right here, of course. But the reason I point this out is because from my bib number, letter K, it's quite a long distance. Now, the other thing of note here, if you look at this little box here, A, B, C, D are roughly here, A, B, C, D. And if you look at the access routes for A, B, C, D, they're the sort of elite runners. They come down this lane here, and you can see 3 arrows pointing down to where they will be starting. So that's sort of comes back from the elites right down to us. And then again, I'll just do that again. If you look at my start time here last year was the very last corral K, starting at 10:40 from there. Now, the other thing of note on here is very simply these kind of things where you've got the Brandenburg Gate here. You can see it very clearly here on the right hand side. And you've also got the Reichstag, a very famous government building right here. So Reichstag, Brandenburg Gate. So if you're walking towards the start or you're taking pictures at the end, remember you finish at the same place as you started. So you will end up somewhere near the Reichstag at the end where they do the medal engraving and all that kind of stuff. So this kind of area here gets really, really busy. Here's the Reichstag and here's the Brandenburg Gates. You'll collect your medals, and once you've collected your medals, you basically then start to dissipate over the day. But the starting point is the one I brought this up for. It's very important to recall that the actual start road, remember this is 8 lanes wide. This picture does it no justice. Here's the actual start. Make sure you get to the correct corral. I'll just point them out here, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and then K, which was mine over there. Just make sure you get the right access route for you. Mine was here. There's another one, block G and J, and as I say, the elites travel in from this direction. I hope that helps. So just to reinforce that, you'll see from what's on the screen right now, water only, water stations only, kilometer 5, 12, 17.5, 22.5, 27.5, 32.5, 34.5, 38, and 40. The nutrition stations with the banana symbol are less frequent, but nevertheless more than enough for a marathon. And you can see they're highlighted in yellow, kilometer 9, 15, 20, 25, 30, and 36. And as I said very carefully, the only Moreton gel station is at kilometer 27.5, there in pink. So here's a map of the entire course. The first thing to point out is the key, which is here, and it's worth noting that there are water stations, nutrition stations, and a Moreton gel station. Now, first things first, let's have a look at an example of the first part of the route. Of course, we start here at the start line. You can see that there, and then you go right across. There you can see there's the first water station, kilometer 5. Kilometer 9, there's a nutrition station. 12, water station. 15, nutrition station. These are all worth studying simply because if you've got a strategy in mind, and knowing where the stations are is really, really useful. The other thing of note is that they are about 4.5 to 5 kilometer equidistant, so that you're never going to run out of water or nutrition. Why am I mentioning that? Because you may very well find that carrying a nutrition pack is not only heavy and bulky, it's completely unnecessary because there's plenty of water on the course. I've just put a dot where they all are, most of them at least. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out very quickly is right here, and important because most people miss it, is the one and only Moreton gel station. There is only one Moreton gel station, and it's at kilometer 27.5. The other thing, of course, when you get to the gel stations, The tables are 200 meters on both sides of the track. So you've got plenty of room. Don't stop at the first couple of tables. Go right to the end. Far less congested and far less risk of injury. And finally, at every single station, there are portaloos. So if you're caught short, need to spend a penny, go for a wee, go at one of those 8 stations. There are many of them on the whole track. So the race itself. So we've had the party atmosphere at the beginning. The DJs go nuts. There's lots of people around you. There's lots of music and fireworks going off. First thing I would say is ignore the surge. There's going to be a surge of people pushing forward. The one thing I've learned from doing most of these marathons is it's your race. So your race, your pace. Don't worry about people rushing off and or flying by you. Let them go ahead. The biggest thing I've learned from the marathons I've done is simply to take your time at the beginning. So be patient is my single bit of advice at the beginning of a marathon. Be patient. For me, that might be 5:30, even 6-minute kilometers. If I'm aiming for a sub 4, I'm looking at increasing that gradually as I get warmed up and through the marathon. But if you run off at a fast pace, there's one thing for sure: you're going to burn all your matches before you even get to sort of half a marathon, distance. So keep an eye out on, it's an analogy I use, the number of matches you're using. 1 match per kilometer, 42 matches in a box. If you burn through 12 or 15 in the first 5 or 10 kilometers, which I see on a very regular basis, by the time you get to sort of 30, 35 kilometers, you are not only going to slow down, your glycogen levels have gone through the floor, gone through the absolutely rock bottom. You're going to stiffen up, and a lot of people then bonk or hit this proverbial wall. Now, the one thing I will say about the wall is it does not exist. There is no wall. Now, this is not necessarily marathon advice, it's more to do with the Berlin Marathon. But as an aside, the wall doesn't exist. I've run a couple of marathons now where I just did not get tired. It's the consistency of running, but it's all about your nutrition and hydration and your marathon block leading up to the marathon, as well as a good taper leading up to the marathon. And when I've got that right, there was no wall. So it's all in your head, that's for sure. So getting ready for the marathon is one thing, and that might be a separate video. But as far as Berlin Marathon is concerned, it's 50,000 plus runners. Your own corral may be up to 5,000 runners. It's going to be very busy, very congested at the start. Be careful is all I would say. I see a lot of people tripping up, falling over right at the start. That is the worst place to fall. If you fall badly and have an injury, you may not feel it in the first 5 or 10 minutes, but that'll come back to haunt you for sure an hour or two later. If you've rolled an ankle or twisted your knee, that's your race done. So at the beginning, please be careful. It's advice that I was given, and it's one that I've taken on board very seriously. Take your time. Be patient at the beginning of the marathon. It's just not worth it. You can certainly do well in a marathon just by keeping steady, keeping at your own pace. Remember, your race, your pace. Try not to run off with the crowd. The excitement is there. The atmosphere is there. It's all too easy to rush off early. But you've only got a certain amount in your fuel tank. If you take the analogy of a car, for example, let's say your car does, 500 miles to a tank full. If you put your foot down hard, the chances are you'll only do 350 miles to that tank full. If you back off the fuel, it will probably take you to the optimum level, which is about 500 miles to the tank full. The same analogy works for your marathon. You've only got a certain amount of glycogen in your muscles and in your liver. That's all the carbohydrates you've been building up 3 or 4 days before the marathon. If you burn through that lot in the first 10, 15, 20 kilometers, you will not have enough to keep you going or sustain that effort level through 25, kilometer 30, 35, and so on. Now, taking gels will of course help, but if you burn through them too quickly, you're unlikely to finish strong. So the first thing I would say, be patient, your race, your pace. Start slow, Remember, you've still got another 42 kilometers to go. Don't underestimate 42 kilometers. Respect the distance of a marathon, and that means work backwards. From the beginning, just take your time. Hydrate well. You will have hydrated all the way through 3, 4, 5 days before the marathon, the morning of the marathon. It's entirely up to what you take. I tend to take a number of things, and I will talk to you about them right now. So, a couple of things of note. First of all, are you going to wear a hydration vest? Now, this one happens to be the one I use for ultra marathons. It's got, I don't know, a dozen or 15 pockets. There's so many pockets on this thing. You can put these sort of semi-solid water bottles through them. Now, this one happens to be very comprehensive, so I wouldn't wear this one. I did get one on the Paris Marathon, which is much simpler. I really like this one, and I haven't seen them on sale or something similar to this on sale. Much simpler. It does have huge pouches on the back and a couple of little pouches on the front. Now, the American, if you've done them, you'll be aware they're very high on security, so you're not allowed to wear hydration packs. Berlin and London, you are allowed to wear hydration packs, which is fantastic. So I may very well wear this one, because for me, although I may not take the bottles, which are fantastic, there are so many water points and so many aid stations on the marathon, the Berlin Marathon, that I probably won't need to take them. Having said that, I might very well take my favorite sort of nutrition and hydration, which is these Tailwind. You get them in different flavors. What I tend to do is pre-open them and just stick them down with a bit of masking tape. When I get to an aid station, I'll pour a little bit in a cup and drink the cup down. So those work really well. That's Tailwind, which I'm a big fan of. But to start off with, before the race, as I said, if you can carb up, I'm a fan of Marathon gels. This is the Drink Mix 320, which is available on the marathon. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I tend to take one of these the day before and one of these on the morning of. These are 80 grams of carbohydrates, which is fantastic. Really does load up your carbs before the marathon. And then, of course, on the marathon, I take the Marathon 160, which is the larger one, which has, I believe, 40 grams of carbohydrates as opposed to the smaller ones, which has 25 grams. So these, I'm aiming for about 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrates per hour. So potentially 2 of these per hour, 1 every half hour. But I'll take 6 of these and 2 of these. Same stuff, Marathon, but these are caffeinated gels, which just gives you that extra buzz. Wouldn't take too many of these, otherwise you might get GI issues. So that's in terms of hydration. The other thing I would say, that a tip that was given to me when I did the London Marathon, and it was reinforced on a couple of the ultra marathons that I've done, is this stuff, Vaseline. Now, what I tend to do, and it's entirely up to you, but the first time I heard about it, I was like, ooh, really? Does that actually work? It does. What I was told to do, or suggested I do, is take lots of Vaseline and just smother your feet in Vaseline, and then get your marathon socks or your run socks, specifically running or marathon socks, not normal socks, put them over the Vaseline. Now, whether it's dry or not is irrelevant. It doesn't do anything if the weather is dry, but if it's wet, it makes a huge difference. I've run through a couple of very, very wet marathons with Vaseline on my feet with the socks over that, and it makes an enormous difference. I've never, fingers crossed, touch wood, had any blisters or any aches and pains in my feet. And it's because when your feet are wet and dry and wet, that's when you start to get the friction, particularly if you've got poor socks on, and you get blisters, whereas Vaseline tends to solve that problem very, very quickly. So lots of Vaseline on your feet, between your toes, then put your socks on. If it's wet, it's a huge bonus. You will not get blisters. So that's your feet. The hydration I've already talked about. When it comes to the start line, we've already talked about the start line, but the race itself, this is entirely up to you. But I also tend to carry some wet wipes and just normal tissues. Why? Well, if you're caught short and you've got GI issues, there are porta potties along the route. Most of them will be just beyond the water station. So the water stations are huge. They've got Marathon Marathon mix to drink. They've got standard water to drink. In Berlin, you also get some food. I think you get half orange or quarter sliced oranges, bananas, etc., etc. And at the end of each aid station, I'll flash them up on the screen in terms of how far apart they are. You get porta potties. So if you're caught short, most of those porta potties are just a few number. In other words, there's not that many of them. So take wet wipes and or tissues in case you have GI issues, rather than hope or pray that they've still got loo roll in the porta potties. Those are fantastic. If you don't need them and you feel great, then just chuck these in one of the bins along the way. There are lots and lots of big, massive wheelie bins en route pretty much every few kilometers. So if there's anything that you're carrying that you don't need to carry anymore, chuck them away. So hydration, the other thing I've seen other people do, and I've done it myself on other marathons, is just the CIS hydration tablets. These are great. You get the little tablets inside. These tablets are fantastic. You put them in 500 ml of water, or as I've done, you can already see I've done it on my last marathon, get half of one, put it in a cup of water and just drink the water back. That gives you your electrolytes, your salt, and everything that you need to stay hydrated and your electrolyte levels high, as well as your glycogen levels with your gels high, all the way through the marathon. And with a bit of luck, there will be no wall for you. All right. So that's the race itself. Stay hydrated, stay well topped up in terms of your glycogen levels and carbohydrates. Now, what I would say is that the avenues through most of Berlin are quite wide, so you're not going to get the congestion. There's a little bit of congestion when you start about 4 or 5 kilometers in, when that sort of 8-lane start corral, the start road from Brandenburg Gates all the way to the Freedom Memorial, starts to go to the right, and it gets a little bit narrow, so you'll get a little bit of congestion. So my other tip is be careful. A bit like the start line, when you have this huge rush, be careful when you get to the first turn. People are still very excited. You're only 4 or 5 kilometers in, and you've only been running 20, 25 minutes, something like that. People are still very excited, and that's where you see people clipping each other's feet or elbowing people out the way. It's not always, well, it's very rarely deliberate, but it just happens. And it's very unfortunate when people fall over, because I say, you get an injury 4 or 5 kilometers in, it's unlikely that you're going to have a good day. So again, when it gets tight, be careful. You be careful that you don't clip other people, and be very observant, be very vigilant that other people aren't slowing down in front of you or tripped up. Berlin is a little bit better than some of the other marathons I've done, but I do see this, and I did definitely see this last year in Berlin. You will get people crossing the road. So as frustrating as it is, it's up to you to look out. Now, I understand there are crossing points in the early miles and the early kilometers, but not everywhere. And you'll see pushchairs being rushed in front of you. You'll see people crossing with bicycles. You'll see families holding little kids crossing in front of you. And once or twice it's got really close for me. You've still got marathon brain, you're focused, you're tired, maybe later on in the race, and then 4 or 5 people cross in front of you. I've seen it, it's not pleasant. People clip each other's feet, fall over, and that's your race pretty much done. So be careful on the race. What I would say is take in the whole atmosphere, enjoy it. You see lots and lots of landmarks. There are places where it's quieter. I don't mind that personally, because on most of the marathon majors, it's very loud. You get huge crowds cheering you, which is fabulous, really is fantastic. But a little bit of a respite is also very welcome, because it does get a little bit too loud sometimes. New York was one example, which was just insane. Down 1st and 5th Avenue, it just becomes very, very loud. So Berlin, not as bad, but it does get very loud, particularly when you go through built up areas and or under bridges. So make the most of the quiet times, gather your thoughts, do a self-check. Have I got any aches or pains? Have I drunk enough? Have I hydrated enough? When was the last time I took a gel? Am I due to take another gel? So one of the things to remember when you're running, just do a self-check-in. Are you doing okay? How are you feeling? And so forth. Remember, your brain is a huge organ, and it pretty much controls everything you do. So have some positive affirmations, that you can say to yourself, particularly in the last 2/3, 3/4 of the marathon, where you haven't got long to go, kilometer 30, 32, you got 10K to go, keep going. Smile to yourself, repeat your positive affirmations. Some people write it on their arms or on their wrist. If you want to repeat something, say it to yourself. I've heard people record stuff on their phones and they play it back through their ear as positive affirmations or positive messages from friends or family. That stuff really does work, and I'm a huge believer in that. Positive mindset, positive affirmations, get them ready before the race so you don't have to think about them on the race, and it makes a difference. Play little games with yourself. Count from 107 backwards to 0 in sevens, for example. I've heard all kinds of tips and tricks. Look at and find 10 red things that you're running past. Look at and find 10 green things that you're running past. Now, of course, if you're running past trees, one tree counts as a green thing, and then look for another 9. If you start to play games with yourself like that, the time passes far more quickly and you're able to keep your mind off potentially being in pain or aching. That pain and aching is temporary and it's not going to do any permanent damage at all. So run through it. Of course, I wouldn't advocate if you've got a serious injury, then obviously you're going to have to stop and sort it out. But if it's just a temporary ache or pain or you're just feeling tired, get through it. It's well worth it. When you get past the finish line and you get your medal, you'll be very, very happy. So a couple of things in summary. Be patient from the start. The race starts, there's a huge surge. Be patient. Your race, your pace. Don't go off at, too fast. You're going to burn all your matches before you get midway. And then absolutely ensure you're hydrating and taking your gels on a regular basis. I learned this the hard way. You sometimes forget. I put a reminder on my watch. My Chorus has that facility. Whatever you're wearing, I'm sure has a similar facility or feature. It has a reminder every 30 minutes to come up to hydrate or take a gel or food. So that's something to set ahead of time, days before the marathon on your training runs. Make sure the alarm goes off every 30 minutes. It's a godsend. Every time it goes off, I do sometimes forget, so I pop one in. Whether you feel like having a gel or not, or some nutrition or not, take it in. Your body needs it. If you're feeling thirsty and you're lethargic and fading, as it were, then it's probably because you haven't hydrated or taken on board any nutrition. So keep ahead of the curve. Don't wait till you're hungry or thirsty. Keep ahead of the curve. I take one every half hour. And for me, as I said, I'm going to try and aim for about 80 grams of carbohydrate per hour. It's roughly 40 grams every half hour, which is one of those big gels every 30 minutes. That's it. Enjoy it. Smile. Wave. High five the children. Wave back. Get the crowd going if you need to. It also keeps you going. Chat to other runners. If you're able to chat, then you're doing fine because you have enough breath and energy to talk. It also passes the time. And I've made some very, very good friends on marathons, which I'm still in touch with now. It's fantastic, the kind of people that you meet on a marathon. It may be a checklist, it may be a bucket list thing that they want to do. They may be doing the 6 marathon majors. You stay in touch and you just keep in touch because you want to check in with them from time to time. How are you getting on with your marathon majors? How did you do on your last marathon? Which marathon are you doing next? And that's the community around running is fantastic, and I really would advocate doing that. So enjoy the race. Don't go off too fast. Don't burn your matches too quickly. Stay hydrated. Make sure your nutrition levels are up, and be aware that the congestion can cause injuries, so stay out of trouble. That way you get to the end. So the final piece is the finish line. So at the finish line, in fact, just before you get to the finish line, let's call it 5 kilometers out. So you've just completed 37 kilometers. You will be at Potsdamer Platz. Now, Potsdamer Platz is 5 kilometers out. There are going to be photographers, so look out for them. Look up at the gantries. You'll often spot them well in advance. And if you listen to them while you're running past them, you'll often hear their cameras on automatic. So, I don't know how many frames per second they're taken, but there's a lot of pictures. So even if you spot them late, but you do spot one, then wave or smile, whatever it is you want to do, because the chances are if you've purchased or bought the photo pack, there might be 6-7 pictures of you doing different things. One of them might be just, with a grumpy face looking down. And as you spot them, you go like, hey! And that's the one, obviously, that you can use for your socials or sharing with your family later. So if you spot the photographers, just smile. They are pretty visible most of the time, and they're usually high up on a gantry, or there's a gantry to the side, generally on the right-hand side. I don't know why it's on the right-hand side, but sometimes they're squatting on the floor. But you'll see other people start to raise their arms or pose. That's a good point throughout the marathon to take pictures. But at Potsdamer Platz, you're about 5k out. What I would say about Potsdamer Platz is if you've done the 5k Generali fun run, which I talked about earlier in the video, then that's the same place you start for the Generali 5k fun run on Saturday. So you'll recognize it. When you get there, be aware that there are photographers there. You then head towards the Brandenburg Gates. One thing I would mention about the Brandenburg Gates is that it's a common misconception that the Brandenburg Gates, Brandenburg Tor, is the end of the marathon. It is not the end of the marathon. You still have about 400 meters to go, and you get this kind of blue carpet. So when you get through the Brandenburg Gates, generally speaking, the photographers, again, for some reason, are on the right-hand side. Keep an eye out for them. It's a great shot. I've got some, I'll put them up on screen now, that I got last year. You get this sort of long shot with the gates behind you. It's an iconic photo. And as I say, if you're going through the Brandenburg Gates, remember, photographers pretty much line that whole bit there for 400 meters from the gates right to the finish line. So keep a smile on your face if you can. If you can't, wave and smile to a couple of them, so at least you get a couple of shots with you smiling. When you finish the marathon, you cross the line. Just one more point on the photographers. There are photographers beyond the finish line on a big gantry, and they'll be taking video as well. So you'll see at your finish time, when you watch the video loop back, it'll be a video of you coming through the finish line. So if you've bought the photo pack, that's also something worth looking out for. But do smile and wave as you come across the end of the finish line, because the photographers are there beyond. So the finish line, as I say, when you're getting from the gates to the finish line, try and enjoy that last 400 meters. You're just about to finish the Berlin Marathon, one of the major marathons of the world. There are only 6 at the moment. Sydney may be the 7th, we're yet to find out. But there are only 6. If you've completed one, that's a big achievement. So congratulate yourself, but more importantly, enjoy that last 400 meters. The crowds are going insane. There's people on the speakers, and you're getting to the finish line. It's a really nice feeling.
Oliver Glas!
Ja, ist da, hast du mitgenommen? Hab ich schon gerufen.
Spiel doch hier rein! Muss er nochmal kommen!
Jan Schneider!
Anja Dormann! Und einmal mit nach vorne rücken!
Jolly!
Silvia Koch!
Hier. Danke. Sabrina Sabina Krenn!
Conny Jan van der Boom!
Thank you!
Superkeit!
Nadine Lachal!
Superkeit!
Romina Madrella!
Christian Lopez! Felix Torres!
Erdmut Lieke! Erdmut!
Carmen!
André Reza Prastano!
Rotztag Wittmann!
Prastanto, sorry!
So when you get to the finish line, of course, there's lots going on there. I mean, of course, if you've crossed the line, you'll get your medal. And if you get your medal, once you've got your medal, you'll go through and you'll see bits and pieces there. They're giving out a goodie bag, and you'll have protein bars, bananas, bottle of water, all that kind of stuff at the end, as you do with most of these larger marathons. Once you've gone beyond that, you then have to remember to, you'll get also, I've got it here, mine from last year, you'll get, it's like a foil that you wear around. It keeps you warm. I just happen to keep mine because I liked it. It's one that I use on other marathons now, and I give to a friend or family member, because unlike a bin liner, it's much bigger. It does genuinely keep you warm. I'm not sure why, because foil tends to do that, but it does work really well. You'll get a foil, you'll get your medal, and you'll get a goodie bag full of little bits and pieces. Once you've done all that, then of course you finish the marathon, take lots of pictures from your own camera, with friends, with you holding the medal, whatever it is. I mean, it's a really good photo opportunity. The organisers will try and move you on. So once you've come through the finish line and you've got some pictures from the professional pictures, while you're still there, take some pictures, get somebody else to take a picture of you, or if you're with friends, to take pictures of you and your friends. Because once the runners start coming through, they will move you on quite quickly. So get those pictures as soon as you can once you've crossed the finish line. If you've paid for medal engraving, it's one of the fastest I've seen. It was fantastic. Medal engraving, it's just there at the finish line, just beyond the finish line, in fact, where you can get your medal engraving. The queue looks really big, but it goes really fast. There's a bank of 12 or 15 engravers. It's all laser engraved. It goes super fast. They'll see your bib number and it'll be done before you know it. And if you've forgotten to pre-order that, I understand it is still only €12. It's well worth it. I've got mine here from last year, and it's engraved. It looks really well. It's very well done. If you haven't prepaid, then I think they accept cash on the days, €12, and it's well worth it because I forgot what time I had last year, so I've had to look it up. So it's nice to have it on the actual medal. And then of course at the end, not only medal engraving, but there are, for Berlin specifically, you've got changing tents, you've got showers, you've got toilet blocks, you've got free massages as well. I haven't used any of those. I'm just too tired. I tend to go back to my bag pickup. Remember, you left your bag there at the beginning of the marathon. Now it's time to go back and pick it up. And that's a really nice feeling because you can just put a clean, dry t-shirt on. You can change your socks or put your sliders on, whatever you feel comfortable in, and a nice warm sort of hoodie or a jumper or pullover, whatever you've packed for yourself. And then I would say hydrate very, very quickly. Drink as much as you can. The toilets are pretty much free now anyway, and in terms of not being congested. So drink as much as you can. There is a free beer. I think it's Erdinger, which is alcohol-frei, which means it's obviously alcohol-free, and that's actually very, very refreshing. Even if you don't drink beer, it's a nice, refreshing drink at the end. It's cold, and I think even if you go back, they'd give you another one because there's loads and loads of them. But have one of those. I had it. It is very refreshing. Get your bag, change into something more comfortable, and then just make the most of the atmosphere. You're there, you've finished, congratulate yourself. Be proud of yourself. You've done an enormous feat and you challenge yourself to run a marathon. You've now completed it. So really well done. And it's a good feeling. And it's one that you can carry on feeling for some time. Just bask in that glow of completing it yourself. You've done a great job. So that's the finish line. So after the marathon, you're probably a little bit tired. You probably want to get back to your hotel or wherever you're staying. There are a number of parties. I haven't been to one, but I understand there are a number of parties starting at about 8 p.m. specifically for the runners, organized by the marathon. And you're able to attend that for free. So, 8 p.m. I understand is the start time for that. There'll be lots of places where you can just have a beer, chill out, relax, have a pizza, whatever your favorite food is. Lots and lots of places. I would actively encourage you to go out that same evening for a number of reasons. One, to make the most of the day. You've had a fantastic day. Yes, you might be tired, but you've got 3 or 4 or 5 hours to relax in the hotel, have a shower, get changed, go back to Brandenburg Gates, get some pictures like I did last year. There are thousands, tens of thousands of people milling around taking pictures. Some of them dress up, some of them have their flags, country flags, whatever it might be, and then they move on to the party, I think at 8 p.m. If you go to the website berlinmarathon.com, you'll find lots of details on there. Remember, this is the 50th year anniversary. The first marathon was run in 1974 with I think 3,000 runners. We're now well over 50,000 runners are anticipated for this one on the 50th anniversary. So there'll be thousands of people there, plus all their friends and family. So it's going to be a very busy time. But what I would say is have a look at the website. It's a big marathon major. They've had 13 world records already at Berlin. It's one of the majors. There are lots of what I would call side events going on because it's the 50th year anniversary. Far too many to list, so have a look at the website and see what's going on. So that concludes this particular video. It was a little bit long, but I wanted to give you as much detail as possible. I thoroughly hope you enjoy the whole experience from start to finish. Be safe. Take your time when you start. Remember to stay hydrated and make sure your nutrition is up where it should be. Try and sleep well the night before. If you don't worry. It's actually the night before the night before. So Thursday and Friday night, a good sleep is much more important than the Saturday night sleep. Get there early. Make sure you got your wristband and your bib. Do a flat lay the night before to make sure you don't forget anything. And then get to the race early. Enjoy the party atmosphere at the beginning. As I say, Berlin has this wonderful sort of bass techno music going on. The DJ go nuts. Start slow, run your race, get to the end, get your medal, get your photographs, and enjoy the whole event. I hope you found this pretty useful. I'd love to hear any comments that you've got, particularly if you've done it before. Many thanks for watching. Take care and have a fantastic time when you get there. Bye for now.